30, so we have a January 25th, 2024 Sherburne County EDA meeting. This is also a meeting which we do first, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Roll call's been done.
Well, we'll do roll call. We have a guest today, so we'll just go around the room if you're okay.
Oh, sure.
Andy Bowler.
Jared Johnson.
Todd Maloney.
Laura Kangas.
Dan Weber.
Ken Giroux.
Brianne Danielowski.
Andrew Hulse.
Jessica Bartle.
Mark Schneider.
I'm Elizabeth Clinton.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, welcome. All right, recognition of new committee members. Do we have any?
We do not have any new committee members, but Ken was appointed for another 6-year term by the county board earlier in January. So congratulations.
Well, thank you.
We didn't invite him to the meeting either.
It was a tough vote.
There was a lot of discussion, a lot of discussion.
It was just done.
They don't like me very much. All right, election of officers. I'll turn that over to you, Dan.
Okay, we do have several positions that are required by our bylaws, so we do need motions one by one on each of these. So first for EDA chair, last year was Ken Giroux, and he has said he will serve again if the committee so chooses. So looking for a motion.
I make a motion that Ken Grew be our chair again this year.
I'll second.
Second, any other nominations? 3 times, right? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll turn it over to you.
And one abstention. All right, an appointment of an executive director.
Oh, we gotta do the other ones here first.
Where?
Vice chair.
Oh, I don't
Oh, you don't,
think I have.
okay, I'll go through them if you're all right.
Oh, I
Mr.
do,
Chair.
sorry, I'm on that. Okay. So vice chair, Andy. Willing to stay?
Yep.
Okay, so,
I'll make a
you do this,
motion.
Barry.
Looking for a motion.
Looking for a motion,
For vice chair.
For vice chair.
I'll make a motion for Andy Bowler to be vice chair.
Motion by Dan, second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, EDA secretary, currently Laura Kangas. I'd make a motion, or I'd entertain a motion, for the EDA secretary.
I'll make a motion for Laura.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the treasurer currently Todd. I'd entertain a motion for the secretary position,
Treasurer.
treasurer's position.
I'll make a motion that you be treasurer for the EDA.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the assistant treasurer, Jared.
I'll make a motion for Jared.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I didn't know that I had an assistant.
She took it all on
To tell you the truth, I didn't either. I was like, whoa,
Yeah, it's in our bylaw. That's something we could look at.
how do I get an assistant?
You have a vice chair?
Yeah, for vice chair.
Oh, good. All right, so executive director, currently Dan, and he's served in that position for many years. I would, like to suggest that we turn that over to Jessica, since she does all the work anyway.
I can't disagree.
Right.
I make a motion for Jessica Bartle to be our executive director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
And we did talk about this yesterday, so.
And say this
Not a
is
surprise.
No, this is all,
You're not throwing me to the
this is
bus.
all
So we can
smoke,
pass
this is all
it between
smoke and mirrors. I tried to get this on a consent agenda, and Dan said, no, we can't do that. So.
Seems like a lot for pie yesterday. You know what I mean? Whenever you get asked out for pie. So.
Okay, guys, remember, legal's in the room.
And he's taking notes.
Taking notes.
Consideration to approve the meeting minutes of December 21st, 2023, see attached. I assume everybody's read those. Any comments? If not, I'd entertain a
The
motion.
agenda needs to be approved.
Oh, we need to approve the agenda? Oh, yeah. Number 6 on there.
Yeah, but I'm running.
I know. That's why I got fired from executive director.
Jessica, hopefully you can give me proper information for the meeting.
I will work with
All right, thank you.
the agenda, approve the agenda.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. All right, back to number 6. That one's done. So, I'd be looking for a motion to approve, the meeting agenda for today.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? So this one I cannot have to follow. Consideration to approve the meeting minutes, from December 21st. Then take a motion to approve the, minutes from last month in December.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from last month.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of official newspaper.
The county board picked the Star News earlier this year, so typically the EDA matches with the county board. So we'd be looking for a motion to name the Star News the EDA's official publication.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And approval of the official depository.
Same, Bank of Elk River was chosen by the county board, so we'd be looking to match the county board with the Bank of Elk River.
You're looking for that motion.
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed. Designation of place of meeting during the calendar year.
I think these next two we could loop together.
Great.
So the location would be the county boardroom, other than we want to discuss having a special meeting at Cargill one day to tour the facility. I know you and I, Jared, talked about February 21st. Would that work for you? And do like a 3:30 time?
Ideally, would we be able to do the week before or the week after, the last week in February?
So the 28th?
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine, it's up to you.
Yeah, that would work perfectly.
Okay. So the normal or regular location would be the county boardroom, with the exception of that meeting. We'd have a special meeting on the 28th at Cargill, 3:30 to end the day.
So moved.
We do have one more on the July 18th. That's the day we have the county board budget workshops. Would everybody be okay if we do not have a meeting in July?
Really quiet then anyway.
Okay, so we
So we're gonna
cross that one
scratch
off.
July 18th.
Yeah, and have 2 in February then. The 15th would be a regular meeting, and then the 28th, we'd have a special meeting at Cargill.
Okay, so we're keeping the 15th.
Keeping the 15th, yeah, but adding, basically replacing July with an extra meeting in February.
So I would accept a friendly amendment to my motion.
Accepted. Second?
Second. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that was approval for the meeting place and the calendar year.
Correct.
Discussion of modifications or amendments to the bylaws or the enabling resolution.
We do not have any suggested modifications at this time, but that's something we should review over the year, so I will bring that back in a future agenda item to see if there's anything we want updated.
Do we know when was the last time we went through that?
2019 or 20, so it's been a little while.
I agree. All right, motion to approve the bylaws and the enabling resolution.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? All right, brings us to the Minnesota Housing Partnership presentation. Who's setting this up, Jessica?
Yeah, so, as you know, we've had several discussions on a local housing trust fund, and so I've brought in Elizabeth Glidden from the Minnesota Housing Partnership. They provide technical assistance to communities to set up local housing trust funds, and so they're kind of the experts in this arena. So I'm just gonna turn it over to Elizabeth and tell us what you know.
Thank you so much. So I have a little presentation. I hope everybody can see it as we move forward, just to kind of guide our conversation, and then we can just do a Q&A throughout, or after, however you desire. Again, my name's Elizabeth Glidden, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Minnesota Housing Partnership, and I'm not sure how I do this. Oh, here we go. Just so I describe a little bit about Minnesota Housing Partnership. We are a 30-plus year nonprofit that works throughout the state of Minnesota. We have 3 primary areas of work. One is we work on public policy development, that is primarily at the state level. We also, many people and organizations know us because of our research. Some of the things that we produce include county profiles. We're about to come out with what we call our State of the State of Housing Report, which is a overview publication of state level data that we then also break down into regions, and then we also produce legislative district profiles throughout the state. And then the final area of our work is technical assistance. And so our technical assistance work is focused on serving rural communities and Native nations. And we work, have worked throughout the state of Minnesota. I didn't bring this other map, but we have now expanded that practice, and we work nationwide with our technical assistance program. So today we're just giving kind of an overview of the Local Housing Trust Fund, including some highlights on what does it take to establish one, how can we think about some funding, and being able to also show a couple of examples of what other communities have done or are doing. So first, just thinking about what is it? There are a lot of terms in housing that sound really similar, and just understanding you're also thinking about a land trust, that's another similar term sometimes people kind of mix up with these different programs. But the Local Housing Trust Fund is, just like it sounds, it's just a fund, and the parameters are that it's set up by your local elected government body. So it would need to be approved by an ordinance by the county board to set one up for Sherburne County. And this is where you dedicate public revenues to a distinct fund. And that's just an accounting term. It doesn't mean it needs to be in a special trust fund, but those funds are dedicated to addressing housing needs. Minnesota Housing Partnership has worked on this issue for many years, and we were part of going to the state and asking the state to set up some enabling legislation to clarify for cities and counties what does it mean to set up a local housing trust fund. The statutory language is extremely broad on how it defines what you can do with your funds for housing. So just to kind of note that. And I'll also say that the enabling legislation wasn't necessary. There are communities that have set up their local housing trust funds before the enabling legislation was put in place in 2017. But it has really helped clarify for communities what is it and how would you do it. And now it is connected also to a funding program that I'm going to discuss later. This is a little bit of the why. I think this is kind of what you all have been talking about. So I'm going to just skip past this. Wanted to talk a little bit about what might be some of those benefits of setting up a local housing trust fund. The Local Housing Trust Fund is one tool that can be a choice for a community, and then the question is it a tool that fits your needs? One of the top issues we talk about with local housing trust funds is, again, kind of from that definition that with the Local Housing Trust Fund, you then have a dedicated place for funding that is for housing. And one of the recommendations that we have is that you might think about whether there is a recurring funding source that you want to put in that local housing trust fund that kind of adds to the predictability of how you're thinking about this from year to year, but that's not required. There are many communities that use one-time sources in their local housing trust funds. Predictability is a big issue in the housing world. This is something where as both your community members are looking at kind of what's the commitment of a community to housing, as well as these outside entities like developers that might be partnering on work that you want to do on your housing projects. That predictability is important, and setting up the Local Housing Trust Fund really helps with that aspect of communication and dedication to what are often longer term projects. This is another kind of big issue, is thinking about leverage, and I kind of put in two different concepts here. One is just the concept of what happens with your public money. And there's been a lot of work on assessing what does it mean to leverage with your public money in a local housing trust fund. So that statistic up there about $1 leverages 6, this is one that is a national number. And we often see that number kind of grow depending on what's happening in a local community. The other issue, though, also very important, is thinking about how leverage works in the current environment, which is very competitive for seeking additional funding, which you may need for housing projects. Showing local commitment is increasingly important. So that you're able to be competitive for the funds that will help your projects come to fruition. And this is one way that you can take a step towards doing that. Flexibility, I would say this is probably one of the top issues for local housing trust funds. Is a local housing trust fund, it is your fund. You are deciding the parameters or what are the programs or how you want to use it. So it's kind of very much this local control aspect of the local housing trust fund. You could use your local housing trust fund just to expand maybe another program that came, from the state. But you could tweak parameters, you could make the program more aligned with what you feel are your community needs, or you could set up a completely different program. One example, I've kind of seen some communities talk a lot now about missing middle housing, which is often kind of these smaller, maybe a fourplex or something like that. This could be a program where we've seen some communities invest in things like this, just as one example. And then we've talked about this a little bit already, that having the local trust fund is also sends a big message about how housing falls in the list of priorities for your city or for your county. So there are a lot of issues that government needs to work through, and having the local housing trust fund helps identify that housing is on that priority list. It has some commitment. Randall Hemmerlin was just one of the local officials that really spurred a lot of the work on local housing trust funds. He was the former HRI director in Red Wing, and really he is the reason that Minnesota Housing Partners started taking on this issue and going to the legislature to set up the enabling legislation. And he was a big one that kind of rung the bell on local control is really important, and that's how we are seeing some of the benefits of the local housing trust fund. Local housing trust funds are pretty common throughout the nation. They also appear, we do a lot of work, Minnesota Housing Partnership, in rural communities, so we often like to show examples of how local housing trust funds also have been very popular in rural communities as well. One of the things we've done is put together a trust fund manual. That's just one of the resources that we have, as well as the technical assistance program that was mentioned. That is another way that now we're investing in Minnesota communities and their ability to explore whether local housing trust funds are right for them. This slide actually is a little bit outdated just because, I would say even in the last year, we are really seeing a tremendous increase in the number of counties and cities throughout Minnesota that are establishing local housing trust funds. So I just haven't had a chance to get my graphics person to help update that, but sort of in that green box, you're seeing some of the recent ones that we've been tracking. And while I would say Minnesota Housing Partnership has done a good job of tracking these because there are so many more communities that are now exploring it, we are, we're just hearing secondhand, so we may be a little out of step with the actual data. Lots of interest right now. So one of the things that we've done is we have done some publications, short publications over the years to look at how are Minnesota communities utilizing local housing trust funds? And we're looking, and a couple of things we do are look at what are common fund sources used by Minnesota communities, and then what are some of the usages of those funds. So this is just some look that we did at what are common fund sources. I can talk about all sorts of examples here for you, but I will say the two most common that we see by far are the levy and TIF pooling as sources. Minnesota cities and counties have a lot of discretion actually around unique one-time fund sources, and so you often see something unique that just is within the power of that city or county to utilize, put into a local housing trust fund as a way to kind of bolster it. This is one of the new things from this year that you've probably been hearing about already. So the legislature actually expanded this program in 2023. It was first approved in 2021 with $1 million that was allocated to a match program to help local communities leverage their local housing trust funds. And then in 2023, some additional funds were put in, and they actually haven't released the program yet, and we are still waiting for that to happen. So at this point, we have just under $6 million that is there in a fund, and it can be used for a one-to-one match for public revenue up to $150,000, and then after that is kind of a 2-to-1 or whatever. So
So will that be a competitive process where?
So again, we haven't seen what they are going to do yet. So they haven't released any of those RFP materials. I would say I think they don't want it to be competitive, but I don't know how. We do think it will be oversubscribed. So I say that saying I don't know how they're going to deal with that. We just think there will be a lot of interest in this program. This is the other, or one of the other kind of major new programs that was approved in the 2023 legislature. And I put this up here because this program has a specific mention of local housing trust funds as to how you might think about if you have a need to hold on to any of your funds beyond a 3-year period. So for this particular program, my understanding is that you're getting about $150,000 annually through this program. And as you know, it's a formula distribution. The statute does articulate some specific uses but they are, again, fairly broad on how you can utilize these funds. We have heard that the League of Minnesota Cities is working with Minnesota Housing on what might be some additional guidance. I've just heard that they are working on that. I think it would be helpful to have a little bit more to kind of guide some of the questions that we're hearing from counties and cities. And then you can see that if these funds are considered spent when they're distributed to a local housing trust fund, but you have to be able to establish that you haven't been able to use the funds on a project within kind of this 3-year period. Otherwise, they have a clawback provision. So we think we've been advising communities that local housing trust funds can be a good way to protect these funds, depending on what are the kind of projects that you are prioritizing with your funding. So again, the other thing we've done some work on is looking at common uses of local housing trust funds. We see a lot of interest in a whole variety of home buyer assistance programs. Gap financing, I think, is another very, very popular use. This is a way that you're looking at how to fill those financial gaps, often for multifamily projects, larger projects. And that gets tied to many communities look at how they can create deeper affordability than what their current financing sources would allow. And that could be another way that you look at that use of the local housing trust fund. Housing stability certainly has been something that several communities have been looking at throughout, but became an increasingly more common use in the pandemic and then since the pandemic. And so housing stability would be like the emergency rental assistance or other kinds of ways to stabilize that household. And it is, of course, a specifically eligible use through the statewide affordable housing aid that you're about to receive. Preservation, this would be any variety of rehab programs that you might choose to do as a way to think about that preservation. So I just put together a couple slides on some communities just to think about. One of them is Washington County. Washington County actually established a local housing trust fund many years ago, but they did it at the CDA level. So I think they're right now kind of thinking about, do we want our board to approve or how do we want this to work? But the CDA itself approved what they call a local housing trust fund. They have funded it to date with a portion of their levy, but they're also looking to put I put local housing aid, but that's the statewide affordable housing aid program. And then for the metro counties, there's the sales tax program that is very similar, and that's what they're looking to put into there. Washington County has prioritized these funds for helping kind of the larger developments that they're trying to attract over the years. And so they've used this for a gap financing program and to look at how, for those larger projects, they might deepen affordability. I included Carver. They are very new to working on a local housing trust fund. They're actually one that I'm working with Carver County right now. Carver County just approved in December a local housing trust fund. The board approved it with an ordinance. The CDA is going to be the administrator. For right now, they have funded it with levy dollars, or an increase to that levy. And they are still considering what to do with some of these additional funding programs like the statewide affordable aid program and the sales tax. So there are two primary uses that they're thinking about, but their first priority is going to be working on home ownership assistance. So right now they're exploring a down payment assistance program, and they're also looking at how they might support sort of an affordability gap for single-family home ownership. They are also looking at how they might think about a rehab program, but that is sort of a secondary priority to getting these other two programs up and running.
So is that a loan or a grant that they're giving? Do you know that?
So they are looking right now at what will be those decisions. My guess is they will have it as either a grant or a deferred loan that could be forgiven. But they're still looking at those policy decisions and doing some comparison looks at what other cities and counties have done recently with their programs. And then the last one I was going to point out is Swift County. I just think Swift County is kind of interesting because they established a local housing trust fund, I think 3 years ago. And they established a local housing trust fund for a very particular purpose. So I think they're kind of unique. So they had this is a fairly low population county, if you're familiar with Swift. And they had so they only have a very small number of subsidized affordable properties within the county as a whole. And there was a particular property where the owner was wanting to leave, and the county had a decision to make. Do we want to buy this property and help maintain it as affordable for the residents that are currently living there or who would want to live there? And they decided that was a priority for the county. And they established the local housing trust fund to be able to support that particular project. And then now they're exploring how they're going to expand beyond that kind of very particular purpose of why they established the local housing trust fund. So that was kind of interesting, just a different motivation for why a particular community might decide to establish a local housing trust fund. So I probably talked a little longer than I thought or you thought, but sorry about that. we have a lot of resources, so I'm happy to talk with Jessica about what might be helpful to you as you're continuing to consider, what you would like to do as next steps. And happy to answer any questions.
How many counties currently have trust funds?
Yeah.
The city, I guess.
And hang on here, I just pulled this up here. There's, I think it is in the range of 10 to 15 right
So
now.
not a lot.
It's, right, it's one of those where it's sort of right now growing quite a bit. I think on the slide that I showed you of those new communities, probably about almost 5 of them were counties. So, and we're seeing interest not just in the metro, but in a lot of interest in greater Minnesota, especially from the county level.
So just to clarify, when you establish a local housing trust fund, you can stand up multiple programs for different needs through a single trust fund.
Right, so the trust fund is really just your bank, so to speak, for kind of the holding container for your programs where you're able to say, these are our dedicated funds that we know won't be utilized for purposes other than housing. And then it's your decision on how do you want to prioritize those funds, what programs. I will say just one piece of caution is not to have too many programs that you want running out of your local housing trust fund. I think I don't know that I've seen more than 3. I often see just one or two. It's because there's a lot of work in setting up these programs. They do have administrative cost. You have to run the programs. And so that's just a consideration when you're thinking about your priorities. The other thing, though, is your program doesn't have to last forever. We have seen communities sort of shift what their priorities are. They might have a program that wasn't as successful or wasn't utilized in the way that they thought it would be, and then they shift their attention to something else. So that can happen as well.
You mentioned there's a broad range of things that the housing trust fund can be used for. Does the money have to specifically be spent on programs, or are administrative costs also included in the acceptable expense?
Administrative costs are included, but there's a limit on administrative costs, and that's in the enabling statute. I think it's 10%. So.
So to tee this up a little more, we have a housing workshop with the county board on February 20th. We received $157,000 from the state over the next 2 years. This is an allowable use. However, there are income requirements that were mentioned on those that, 80% of the AFI, is that what was in your slide?
Yeah, so this is a good question. The local housing trust fund itself doesn't have income requirements. However, the funding sources you want to put into that trust fund may have income requirements, and the statewide affordable housing aid does have income limitations. So that's just another thing to think about as you're monitoring these. And yes, I think it's 80% and then 115 for homeownership, if I'm right. Because I think it follows the challenge fund income parameters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting for that meeting.
Yeah.
If somehow we could do an inventory on existing spend in the county that is being spent on these types of needs, that could potentially be shifted from, wherever it is being spent today into the housing trust fund. So it would be a shift to a specific program.
Absolutely, we can get those numbers.
Can I ask one question about the statewide housing affordability aid? Was that just directed at counties, or did cities also get that?
Some cities also get it.
Okay.
So,
And kind of under the same mechanism where you got a 3-year window, or you have to put it into local housing trust fund or some other
yes, all
HRA
those
or.
requirements will be the same.
Okay, so
Right.
our city's got it then too, or some percentage.
Some of them, right, and so it's some first and second class cities, and there's a formula basis, so there will be a spreadsheet that you can access that will show you how many of your cities received that statewide affordable housing aid.
I think in Sherburne County, Elk River was the only one. It was like,
Might make sense,
yeah, I think it was like, I can't remember if it was 15 or 20,000 population and over cities received
that's
this
it,
funding.
okay.
Yeah.
So can you pool those together? Can cities and counties work together on the same?
So we're seeing a lot of questions on that right now. So yes, you can. I think some of the questions are, just how much control does the city still want of their funds? Or do they see the benefit of pooling up, and then how you decide on how you want to utilize those funds? So I think we're hearing a lot of questions right now on how cities and counties might best do that. I'll just say too, there are some particular uses of the statewide affordable housing aid that just like a county level might be better suited to do. One of the examples that was just brought to my attention was, again, this isn't something you've mentioned you're thinking about, but emergency rental assistance is called out as an eligible use, in part because, we're still seeing high rates of evictions throughout the state and so forth. Counties are just better, more familiar, I would say, and have more infrastructure set up either to administer the kind of programs themselves or know what nonprofits they might work with, CAP agencies or such, to administer those kind of programs. So I think we'll see more examples like that of how much do cities want to set up their own infrastructure versus working with the bigger entity like the county to do it.
So taking funding out of it, what does the group see as the biggest need? You saw 5 different options up there, from preservation to gap financing. If we bring this to the board, I'm looking for some feedback on what you think would be best served.
So we talked about this, last time we talked about it was, I want to be careful what we spend it on so that it doesn't mask increasing the cost of housing, right? So we've got to be careful on that. From my perspective on the board, what I would like to see is something that enables us to leverage more construction, I guess, but I don't know what that looks like. I think we need to
Curious,
think
would that be
through.
like gap financing possibly for a developer?
Probably maybe for a developer, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Preservation of current homes, that would bring some construction into it. What do you think, Ken?
There's a lot of moving parts here, and I don't know. It's one of those things that there's unintended consequences that have to be thought about with all of this, so, it's very easy to throw something on, but, if you think through it a couple more layers, then, okay, how's that going to? I agree, I don't think creating housing subsidies is a long-term solution, okay? However, how can we offer the assistance without being a subsidy? And I don't think I've thought through it enough here to really add much at this point. I've got a lot of questions rolling through my head right now.
Is there, it might be helpful to have some best practices from other organizations. There's only 10 counties that have done this, so I'm not sure we've got a whole lot of good examples in Minnesota, but maybe outside of Minnesota. Is there some best practices that we could learn from other, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody else has done this.
So I guess I would just ask, are you looking for examples of how jurisdictions, determined their priorities, or are you just looking for examples of what programs have been utilized?
I'd be interested, I think, speaking for myself, in learning what programs other sort of county level organizations have utilized, and what was the outcome of those programs? What was the result? And to Ken's point, were there any unintended consequences? Might as well, I mean, obviously other entities have done this. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, I just think if we can learn from what others have done, we might be able to pick up some best practices and see, and that I think will spur some additional conversation around how we could potentially, we may not follow a program exactly, but we may see some things we like, we may see some things we don't like. And if we want to focus in, I think it's well said, we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. We want to focus in on, probably one, at most two programs. And so my experience is that if we're going to do something like that, we want to put ourselves in the best position to be successful so that we can build on that, rather than have it be a crash and burn, right?
Well, and one takeaway I got was, somewhat local, Swift County. They had a specific project, they utilized this, evidently they found success with it because now they're looking to move into something else. I'd like to talk to Swift County.
Yeah.
And say, okay, well, evidently it worked for you, or it worked enough that you were willing to, try to move it into something else.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean,
I'd also like to understand more on the leverage of the dollars within the fund. The reason I ask about administrative costs is, in my mind, we want to have the maximum dollars in the fund that we can in order to be able to leverage those dollars for other programs, which probably includes trying to have some administrative costs in there, depending on how those other funds are granted. So that's the other thing I was thinking about is we probably don't want to exclude administrative costs if those can be also shifted into the program, if that gives us leverage for other dollars.
I would say too, there's kind of two different ways to leverage dollars. There's what you're talking about, leverage them back into the fund. But then when you're talking about a program that would enable us to get more construction, like for instance, the state of Minnesota has the local housing tax credit program, and when a developer puts in an application for a project for that, they have to, they get awarded points based on certain criteria. And one of those categories is having partnership from a local, whether it's county, city, funding put into their project, and they get points for that. And I can say I've spoke directly with the developer and reviewed their application that was denied. And one area they had 0 points on was obviously the city that they were working in wasn't entertaining TIF at that time and for that project, and then we don't have anything for them, so they had 0 points in that section, which would have made that application more competitive, and then they would have been able to leverage those housing tax credits, which would have made their project more affordable. So that's one area too where a program like this would help a project like that move on. And then also, Ken, I know the director from the Swift County EDA HRA.
of course you do.
And she's actually, her name's Diana, and she's like my go-to buddy when we go to like EDM and stuff like that. But anyhow, I can talk to her and get some information from them about their program.
I know you have to leave, Elizabeth, thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
I apologize.
Thank you very much.
On my way to Virginia, and sorry for that.
Thank you.
Because it would be interesting too to find out, like, how can we be an assist to, one of the projects that had tax credits related to the project in Big Lake. It was Aon. When they first came to the table with their tax credits, they were looking at doing affordable. And then they needed to pivot, and this has been a project that has been going on for, gosh, what do I want to say, 10 years,
Yeah.
6, well, I think more than 6, I think.
2015.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's taken them that long and they finally pivoted to senior housing. And then they finally were able to, you know, they still have land, they still have an idea that they'll do affordable as well. But they were just getting nowhere with getting the tax credits. And as time went on, the costs continued to go up.
Sure.
And so then it was like it was just trying to chase this ball that was continually moving away from them. But they finally did, so that they broke ground. The senior is going up, but
Well, I hesitate to throw this out there because I think it's premature, but, I will anyway. I wonder if one of the thought processes we should be having is trying to set up something within this fund that can better engage the smaller developers. I think of it as a whole, so, 70% of the economy is supported by small business, not the big corporations. So there's a great source there that's sitting on the sidelines because where Aon, their business model is built around subsidized funds, and they have staff all over that, that's all they do. But your smaller developers don't play in that game, okay, they don't have the staff, but for the, like Swift, let's say for a smaller fourplex, eightplex, some of these deals here where Aon's not gonna deal with any of that, but your smaller developers would if they could have some guidance, some assistance, whatever. And then some of it's not all financial, some of it's just resources on how to, get this done or where it can be done, how it can be done. Well, because what I heard from everybody is spurring construction is the thing. And if we can engage the 70% that are on the sidelines and spur them, are we gonna get more bang for the bucks than just adding to already subsidized projects from your bigger developers, that already have the resources, and that's their business model.
well, and that to me is where the stopgap potential comes in, because when I look like, and here again, I'm talking big like, there's a 90-acre property that is sitting along 205th. There's city infrastructure right across the street from it. The landowner wants $1.8 million, and there's already a ghost plat that's been kind of designed for it. And if a smaller developer is gonna come in, that's just the cost of the land. Now you're gonna have to deal with the infrastructure costs. What's preventing this prime piece of property from selling? And it's gotta be,
And
they just can't pencil it.
there's a risk with that property and working with that property. And the risk that exists is they could make a request to, or they could subdivide the property in some way that might be to a disadvantage of the city. So I've been trying to talk to the city about that specific property, and yes, that is one of the obstacles that exist. And I just would love to piggyback on Ken's point about, not necessarily chasing down the Pulte homes, the Lennars. Our local development builds certain character, and they build, and money stays in our community. You look at some of the local developers going back the last 40 years, they developed the county, have certain character, know the county well, and the money does stay in this community. I think of all the contractors that I work with throughout the region, they're doing the roads, they're doing the improvements, but they aren't able to take those leaps because of some of the finance, the economic development side, the side that I don't see all
Well,
the time.
and there's another one, 33 acres for 1.2 million. Infrastructure from the city is right along the tree line there. What's preventing that? And that's been on the market for a good number of years.
No, but once again, back to what you were saying with Ken, the other advantage I think is, because I used to work with, years ago, I worked with both national builders and local builders and new construction. The decision-making process is very slow with the national builders. There's some advantages to working with them because you get scale. But working with local builders and developers, they're much more agile. So there is another advantage there to think about if we wanted to try to focus in on that as well.
And just speaking personally, yes, you can actually go in and talk with planning and zoning one-on-one, not as a legal team, but hey,
Right.
Mark, we need to discuss this, or hey, Mitch, I got this situation, and you can usually work through some situations. in a more human factor than getting the 16-page document, you know, and starting the process.
It's gone through 3 lawyers.
Exactly.
Sorry,
So,
Nothing against
but-
attorneys.
yeah, nothing against attorneys.
So, like when we've been developing in the county too, we've seen some inefficiencies too, I think. Like, one example is like in Orac, the park dedication fee is $1,200 per lot, I think, right? And at the meeting, they're basically, well, we don't have any parks, we don't need any parks. So they have this fund that already has, I think, like $80,000 or $90,000 in it, and they're like, well, we can't tap it for anything else, so the money just sits there and grows, but they don't have any use for it, so it just out there in limbo.
You have something, Andy?
No, I was just gonna, one comment on that. I think the gap funding would work because what you're talking about with those lands of why aren't they moving? It's the risk factor of if we start building these, can we sell them? The holding cost of them. But the one thing too is, as a bank, we are regulated on development land that we can only lend 65% loan to value. And how it works is raw land for development is 65% loan development. Once the lots are ready to be sold, then you can go 75%. But how many of these investors, especially the small ones, have that cash to put down? And that's just to buy the land. Now you have to go get the infrastructure into that stuff. I mean, we've done a number of deals up in the St. Cloud area, and the numbers are very, and that's what stops a lot of it from happening.
And I think you bring up a great point that doesn't get discussed, is the risk factor as far as the carrying costs. Even if we could, or a developer could fund the initial project, the carrying costs, and that's what takes most developers down, is carrying costs, it isn't the initial, cost. So is there a safety net that can be put into place, to mitigate some of that risk factor that would entice people to, because they're still making the bulk of the investment, but we're kind of, you know, can you put in a what-if situation where, yeah, it's not gonna crash and burn in 3 years should things slow down, which is detrimental to the county, obviously, when you have, you know, developments defaulting left and right, that's horrific for the county.
We saw that, you know, back in the recession with all the developers that we were working with. And, you know, once you get that parcel, that piece of land parceled out, all those taxes start skyrocketing on you. And if you have 10, 15 lots and you can't get them moving,
Right.
the holding cost is, it doesn't work.
But here's another unintended consequence of that plays into that. So we do hit another recession, we'll just refer back to 2008. And yeah, probably 95% of the developers went under. They walked in and said, here's $10 million worth of land, right? One of the biggest costs that wasn't necessarily financial, but there were some very high-quality developers that were taken out of the market, okay? Once they went under, obviously, they're not bankable, you know, there's a lot of, so, you know, I can think of 5 of probably the best small developers that we're talking about here that have never developed another piece of property. Well, that's a huge cost, that's a huge, you know, loss of talent. And so if you safeguard that somehow to keep these guys in business, to continue developing through the years, you know, and that's probably one of the things that's retarding the development right now is those guys aren't here, you know? These are the guys that would have been doing the 90-acre pieces and the, you know, the smaller stuff and be able to work it through the system. And I think, you know, Mark knows a few of the guys I'm talking about, but they're never, you know, once you're done at that point, because when you tip over that hard, it's hard to sit down and across from your desk, right?
Yeah.
So.
I think it gets back to the point that we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. If we try to accomplish too much, you almost set yourself up for failure.
And we don't wanna subsidize bad business practice or circumvent the free market. And that is the huge tightrope that we walk here, which makes me very nervous on at what point do you do that?
And what would make me, like, this gets back to the point I was making before on looking at what others have done and what the results have been. And trying to get some ideas on some best practices and not so best practices. And just see how other counties have gone about it. Probably, like I said, probably outside of Minnesota, because I don't think that's a big enough sample size. And we might get some good ideas out of that. And then start small. Start small and very focused, and learn what we learn from that.
Part of my concern too is when I watch what is, there's a huge desire that people want to be in this county. And when you focus down into cities, depending on where they're at, I think right now when I just went on the real estate site and you take out pendings and sales, there's between land and housing, there's 40 available in the city of Big Lake. And that means, no, not just the city, also the township and Orac Township. That's low. And so when people come to purchase something, they're willing to pay greater. So it pushes everything up in our county for costs because we are so, in my opinion, so extremely low on what we have available for the market.
I looked this morning, so if you take out all of the contingent transactions, so I did a search in Sherburne County from homes built to 2023 or before. There are 122 homes.
That's
throughout the entire county.
that is really you're not balanced enough, and you're going to push your costs, your rates up, and what people are going to pay to be out here, and it's a snowball effect.
It is, but, then we need to wrap this up. So what I'd like to do is maybe discuss a few action steps, because obviously we're not going to get done here.
Mr. Simon wants to jump in.
Well, it's the only time it's on the table. Do you have an idea of what kind of housing stock you want to focus on?
I don't think we've got that far in the
Single family, is it multifamily, is it subsidized, is it?
We haven't got that far in the discussion.
That might help drive the discussion of what programs.
I mean,
And that's a housing study, right? I mean, the housing study is gonna help shed some light on that, they're gonna redo that work. And I mean, I think we have some perspective from the 2020 housing study from our comprehensive plan. And I think the next step for this EDA group, I think is very critical for us, is to make that decision. We need some additional analysis on what.
Because there's a lot of traditional tools we have that this could supplement, but not, depending on what type of housing stock you want to look at.
Well, and that was one thing I heard Andrew say early on, is what programs do we have in place that, this is $160,000, I think we get another $160,000 next year, right, so $320,000, it's not, are there other things that, this could go to help strengthen those existing programs that are already in motion?
Well, my point was, rather than look for new funding sources, let's look at the existing funding sources that we're already using, as a possibility to shift those into the HRA, because what that does then, without increasing, because the other thing we don't want to do is drive a program that increases taxes, right? And so if we can use those sources and shift those into an HRA, that gives us more dollars to leverage outside dollars that we can bring in, right? It's a multiplier effect.
So, as far as trying to boil this down, and I don't see this as being a quick process, as I don't think it should be. We have to look at a lot of different things. So we've thrown out there that we'd like some additional information from other programs, and maybe that's just a good way to start. And maybe that's the only place to start at this time.
Well, that in concert with the housing study.
With the housing study,
Right.
and I view that as a separate deal that's
Yep,
kind of
yep.
working on its own, but.
And I just wanted to make a comment that Big Lake is getting $34,000 this year, got $34,000 this year.
Okay.
Elk River got 94, St. Cloud got 375. So those are three cities that got funding for the local housing aid. fund, and that was their first payment out, so they would get an additional, so to, you know, when we look at Big Lake, they have certain needs, they did get some funds for this, so hopefully they're going through the same effort or exercise. No, hopefully they will.
Probably will be.
Will be. We can help make sure that they're paying attention.
To the housing study, is that something we wanna move forward with now?
Well, I've got that on my notes here, and I thought maybe you were going to, address that with your presentation, so is there anything else on the housing fund here that anybody wants to throw out, as far as what we need to go forward? Like it says, I think if we get some reference data and maybe give some time to everybody here, give some time in the next month to really kind of drill down on this, we might have something better to go to.
And I would encourage too, as you're thinking about it, if you have an idea, something that you want some more research on or more discussion on, just shoot me an email and I'll make sure that that gets on the agenda. As far as the housing study goes, I just heard back from Matt Mullins yesterday, and he sent over an example of like a housing study refresh, and then we have our comprehensive one. So I'm gonna send that out following this meeting to the EDA, so you guys can look over an example of both, and then just some bullet points of really what the differences are. I don't know, can they respond back in the email as a vote, or do we have to wait till the next meeting to vote on whether or not, which one to move forward with?
Can't vote by email.
Yeah, okay, so we'll have to wait until next meeting then to decide which.
Well, we do have funds in the budget. Can they give staff direction to move forward with this today? If
Is that on the agenda?
housing is.
Well, aren't you just a party killer?
That's what they go
Tell
to.
me.
I mean, there's the 2020, there's the 2028 EDA, or 2023 EDA recap, and this technically started in 2023, so we're just recapping.
We did get funding from the Initiative Foundation, so 1/4 of the study would be funded.
Is it budgeted?
We have a project budget, not necessarily allocated to any particular project.
You know what, I mean, instead of trying to kind of circumvent and work around, would it be that bad if we waited till next month, put it on the agenda, we all had time to get the information, absorb it, and didn't do it correctly, and then we'll make one person really happy.
Well, but I also think it's the right way to do it.
It is, that's, you know,
Let's do it right.
yeah.
All right, so I'll send that out. Can I go, do you want me to do my update?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I put up, I'm not gonna go through this whole thing, I just wanted to share with you guys, I pulled out, just kind of a review of our 2023. I'm not gonna, like I said, go over everything, but I am gonna pull out one or two things in each category. So under childcare, oops. Did I print out the wrong one? I might have printed out the wrong one. Okay, well,
Not
so.
yet, start, Jessica.
I know, not
The
again.
EDA.
I printed really odd. Oh, I don't have the first page. Sorry, Chrissy. Can you go back up to the top for workforce? Thanks. Okay, so under workforce, I just wanted to highlight a couple things that I'm most proud of that we participated in. So the Elk River High School DECA 3 entrepreneurship class presentation. I've also reached out to all of the other DECA and internship/business teacher programs within all the school districts in the county. So Princeton, Becker, Big Lake, and Elk River, and Zimmerman School as well. And we're gonna be meeting with them. So the city of Becker received a grant for entrepreneurial development cohorts. And we decided that we're gonna include a portion of the participants in those cohorts pull from our schools. And so Becker is gonna have half of the participants, and then we get to share the rest within the county. So we're gonna have these meetings with our, I would say, entrepreneurial minded students and give them the opportunity to apply to those programs. Housing, obviously one of our fun accomplishments was the Housing Summit and everything that's come after that. Feedback from that summit during the panel discussion was that we should help provide some education on funding opportunities for builders and developers and also for home buyers. So we have 2 workshops coming up. One is gonna be on March 13th, and that's the Minnesota Housing Homeownership Workshop. So representatives from Minnesota Housing are gonna be coming to the government center. It'll be from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. here in the Maple Room, and it will be for people interested in home ownership or people who own homes and are looking to move or even rehab their current home. Minnesota Housing has several different programs for that, so just to make sure that people in Sherburne County are aware of those resources that are available, how to access them, and everything else that goes along with it. The second one is gonna be for builders and developers, and that's gonna be on Wednesday, March 27th, from 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. here at the Government Center. And again, Minnesota Housing is going to come and talk about the funding that has come from the state, and there are several new programs for housing builders and developers to access funding to make their projects more feasible, so we're gonna do kind of an education on that. Policy review and updates. Obviously, we updated our tax abatement policy and our strategic plan. Those were 2 pretty big accomplishments, and then we've also visited all the townships and several city council meetings throughout the end of the year. Broadband.
Can you scroll down, Chris?
Yep. So broadband accomplishment, that map kind of speaks for itself. The October 2022 coverage map, you can see the pink unserved and purple underserved area. And then if you look at the October 2023 updated map, there's a lot more aqua color in there, and that is served. So 15% of the ARPA dollars that the county received approximately was dedicated towards broadband infrastructure, and it shows in the progress
This goes
that
to
we've
your
made.
point, Andrew, how some public dollars can lead to private investment, because those projects got a lot of these other projects started.
And then, moving on down to childcare now. So I committed to serving on the City of Becker's core team for their Rural Childcare Innovation Program. This was one that, from First Children's Finance, that I brought to the county. They told me that it wasn't really a county level initiative, it needed to go to the cities. Becker applied, they were awarded participation and technical support for that. So we are now helping them with that, which has been enlightening, we'll say that. The need is great. The next one, the federal designation. We are actively working with the Initiative Foundation, the Federal EDA, and Region 7W partners on the logistics of this and the development of a regional development commission that would have federal designation. And then the next one, transportation. The participation with CMRP has been ongoing. They are moving forward with a Pell study to explore transportation solutions over the river. And so that is still very much moving forward. And then business retention and expansion. We did get in 25 business retention and expansion visits last year that were logged in our Executive Pulse software. And then this year we have a strong start. I've already got 5 in for January. I think my goal was 50, so I'm a 10th of the way there, Ken. It's only the first month. So that's been a really great program. I have businesses actually reaching out to me and asking me to come and visit with them. So word is getting around that we're doing these, and so that's pretty exciting. Marketing, that's a big marketing Sherburne County and what we have for economic development for our business community. Actively participating in the chambers. I don't think I hardly ever miss a meeting with any one of our chambers or anything else they've got going on. Several different business groups like the Zimmerman Business Council, the Downtown Elk River Business Association. I've been to the Clear Valley Business Community meetings, just all different kinds of ways to connect with our business community. And then another highlight for me was providing the regional economic update for the Elk River Area Chamber of Commerce. So in 2020, I don't know what year did I get hired, 2, I think. I went to that meeting working for my previous employer, and I was in the interview process with Dan. And that's where I first got to see really what this was all about, and I got to talk to him there a little bit. So it was kind of fun to then come back the next year and be presenting at that meeting. It was like a full circle moment. Anyways, I really think that the EDA has become a trusted resource for the business community. And then I would say that's pretty much it for the highlights. They're all, a lot of our, bigger things are in there, but those would be my highlights.
And the Greater MSP Tour, they'll be here next month to review that.
Yep, so they will be here next month to give us the feedback on that land tour that they did with us. So that's all I have.
Great.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Very well. Any questions for Jessica?
I got one more thing before we adjourn.
Absolutely.
We forgot the time of the meetings going forward. I think we wanted to move it to 8 o'clock. Does that still work for everybody? 8 to then maybe 9:30. We'll try to get out of here a little over an hour.
Yeah. Anything else?
Can I add just one thing about backing up on the housing stuff? So, just thinking about it, sitting here, like a lot of the things that we heard recurring, like through that summit that we had, was the development cost. Is there a way that maybe we could think about partnering? Because I think the city sewer and water seem to be the biggest expense. Would it be better off partnering with the city, trying to lower that cost? Because I think if you lower the cost, you'll end up sparking enough interest to get development to happen on its own naturally, with less administrative costs too.
Another thing that would be good for you to do would be to talk to Paul Novotny. So, because he's working a piece of legislation that he and I have been working on. Three of the points are around lowering property taxes, but the fourth point is about repealing some of the regulations that drive up the cost of new construction. And so they've been looking for input from that. They've got staff working on it, from their perspective. But hearing it from developers and builders directly would be very helpful. So if you wanted to reach out to Novotny on that stuff, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that goes into, if Rand was here, she'd be over hugging and kissing you right now. She'd go right across the table. So you've got support on that.
I'm glad I waited.
Some areas. Because she gives me an earful on that all the time. So definitely something that should be in the talking points to discuss. And I don't know the legalities of that. I think there's gonna be some, I know in my previous experience of trying to connect Sherburne or county funds and city funds, there's sometimes some legalities or some overreach that cities push back on as far as who's in charge and things like that. So, but yeah, I think definitely worth talking about.
Again, there might be some larger policy implications too you'll have to chew on, because if you subsidize just the city infrastructure, then you have a bunch of townships that are gonna say, wait a minute, if we do a cluster development or a community system, why aren't we getting assistance? So we have that equity we have to balance. And then in addition, there may be a public policy or public purpose though of subsidizing municipal wastewater systems over private, because they tend to be better regulated, they're better for the environment. So you may have to chew a bit on that idea and then have the county board chew on it.
Absolutely. No, it's a big undertaking for us, but I think it's good discussion. Anything else? And then I would look for that motion.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, we're done at 9:43.